Imagine this for a second. You've been waiting for years thinking, alright, the next Transformers movie has to be that G.I. Joe crossover, right? And then Paramount walks into the room like that one friend who changes the movie 5 minutes before everyone starts watching. That makes the future of Transformers even more interesting because now nobody really knows what direction this giant robot train is about to take. One thing we do know, though, the engines are definitely running again. Transformers 8 is moving forward. Paramount has officially taken a big step by bringing in a writer, but the biggest surprise isn't who joined the project, it's what this movie may not be. Jason Fuchs has now been hired to write the script for the next live-action Transformers film. The movie doesn't even have a title yet, which basically means everything is still wrapped tighter than Optimus Prime's secrets. Plot details are being kept completely under wraps, but according to reports, this movie will continue the storyline from Rise of the Beasts. So if you were wondering whether that movie was just a one-off experiment, probably not. It looks like Paramount still wants to build on what it started there. Now, Jason Fuchs isn't exactly new to big franchises. He co-wrote It Chapter 2, worked as co-creator, co-showrunner, and executive producer on It Welcome to Derry, and his film credits also include Wonder Woman, Ice Age Continental Drift, and Argylle. So this isn't some random name being pulled out of Cybertron. Paramount clearly picked someone who's already comfortable handling huge blockbuster worlds. And then you look at the producers: Steven Spielberg, Michael Bay, Lorenzo Di Bonaventura, Mark Varadian, Tom DeSanto, Don Murphy. Yeah, that's a lot of familiar names attached to one project. Whether you're a fan of every Transformers movie or not, you can't deny that's a pretty experienced production team. But here's where things suddenly become a little confusing, in the fun way. Most people believe the next movie would naturally be the G.I. Joe crossover teased at the end of Rise of the Beasts. Noah Diaz literally gets recruited. The setup was right there. It wasn't subtle, it practically screamed, "See you in the next movie." Well, apparently not. Stephen Cable Jr., who directed Rise of the Beasts, has now confirmed that the next Transformers movie is not that crossover film. Plot twist. During an interview, Cable Jr. explained that he still has big plans for the Transformers and G.I. Joe crossover. He even said it's still in development. But, and this is the important part, he's not involved with the next Transformers movie that's currently moving forward. Think about what that means for a second. The crossover still exists. It hasn't disappeared or been cancelled, but it also isn't the immediate priority. Now we're sitting here asking the same question. If the G.I. Joe movie isn't next, then what exactly is Transformers 8? And that's where things get interesting. Remember, reports still suggest this new film may continue the Rise of the Beast storyline. That doesn't automatically mean it'll immediately jump into G.I. Joe. Those are two different things. Paramount could easily continue characters and storylines established in Rise of the Beasts while saving the crossover for later. That's entirely possible based on everything we know so far. It actually feels like Paramount is keeping several doors open at the same time instead of locking themselves into one direction. Which, if you follow Transformers over the years, kinda makes sense. This franchise has taken some pretty wild turns. It all started back in the 1980s with toys, comics, and animated series. Then Michael Bay arrived in 2007, and suddenly giant alien robots were crashing through cities on the biggest movie screens possible. That first live-action Transformers movie became a monster success, earning over $709 million worldwide, while also picking up 3 Oscar nominations for sound editing, sound mixing, and visual effects. And once Paramount realized audiences loved watching cars explode into giant robots, there was no stopping them. Revenge of the Fallen came next, then Dark of the Moon, Age of Extinction, then The Last Knight. Financially, those movies were enormous. They earned anywhere between about $605 million and $1.12 billion globally. Dark of the Moon still holds the record as the highest-grossing Transformers movie. Critics were having a completely different conversation. Transformers has never exactly been the franchise critics rush to hug. Most of the live-action movies landed somewhere between 16 and 57% on Rotten Tomatoes. Then, Bumblebee showed up and suddenly everyone was like, wait, we like this one. It scored 91% with critics, making it the highest-rated live-action Transformers movie by a huge margin. Rise of the Beasts received mixed reviews from critics, but audiences responded much more positively. Unfortunately, despite that audience support, its box office didn't reach the heights of the earlier Bay films. Actually, if you look at the numbers, Bumblebee and Rise of the Beasts became the two lowest-grossing live-action Transformers films, earning roughly $467.9 million and $441.6 million, respectively. So now, Paramount finds itself in a really interesting position. The franchise is still valuable, it still makes money overall, but recent films haven't reached those gigantic billion-dollar numbers from before, which may explain why there are suddenly multiple Transformers projects being developed instead of just one obvious sequel. That's another really fascinating part of all this. Apparently there isn't just a single roadmap sitting on someone's desk. Michael Bay reportedly has his own movie idea that he wants to direct, with a screenplay by Jordan Van Dina. Meanwhile, Josh Cooley, who directed Transformers 1, is also expected to direct another live-action Transformers project, although nobody knows what that movie is about either. Then you've got Jason Fuchs writing this newly announced film. And somewhere in the background, the Transformers and G.I. Joe crossover is still quietly developing. That's a lot of giant robots waiting in line. What's especially interesting is that Rise of the Beasts was intended to be part of a planned trilogy. As of now, that trilogy hasn't been canceled, it just doesn't seem to be Paramount's immediate focus. That could mean several different things. Maybe they're simply figuring out which direction audiences respond to the most. Maybe they want to rebuild momentum before jumping into an even bigger crossover event. Or maybe they're just taking their time instead of rushing everything. The important thing is, none of those possibilities have been officially confirmed. Right now, they're simply possibilities based on where the projects currently stand. Even Cable Jr. himself sounded hopeful rather than certain. He basically said the crossover is still developing and there's still time, so you never know. That doesn't sound like someone closing the door, it sounds more like someone waiting for the right moment, and that might not be the worst approach. If the crossover eventually happens, you probably want audiences to be genuinely excited instead of feeling like they're being pushed into another shared universe before everything else is ready. Meanwhile, Jason Fuchs' movie now becomes incredibly important, known for whatever comes after. Whether that's another Rise of the Beast sequel, or leading into G.I. Joe, or whether it ends up taking the franchise somewhere nobody expects, right now nobody outside Paramount really knows. And strangely enough, that mystery might actually be one of the coolest parts. For once, fans can't confidently predict the next move. Usually by now, we'd already have people making 37 flowcharts connecting every post-credit scene to every possible sequel. This time, even the director of Rise of the Beasts has confirmed that the movie everyone expected isn't actually next. That's a pretty big surprise. So where does that leave Transformers 8? Well, we know Jason Fuchs is writing it. We know reports say it may continue the Rise of the Beast storyline. We know Stephen Cable Jr.'s G.I. Joe crossover is still alive, but isn't the next movie. We know multiple Transformers projects are currently being developed. And we know Paramount clearly isn't finished with giant robots transforming into slightly more expensive giant robots. Everything else? That's still waiting to transform. So for now, the future of Transformers isn't completely clear. But one thing is, the franchise is definitely not rolling out quietly anytime soon. So yeah, that's everything we know about Transformers.